You still loyal to them?" That's what Prince Harry sneered right in the courtyard of Buckingham Palace. He expected silence, but the guard's response. He didn't break his stance. He didn't lose his composure. And when he finally answered with one sentence even, the prince was left speechless. Want to know exactly what he said? Hit that like button and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The drizzle hung like a silk veil over Buckingham Palace, soft and persistent, soaking into the flagstones and misting the polished black boots of the lone guard standing beneath the north archway. Lance Sergeant Callum Fraser didn't flinch, didn't blink. His SA-80 rifle rested diagonally across his chest, held with the kind of grip that could stay firm through thunder, wind, or today-mockery. Fraser was 36 career infantry, 10 years in the rifles before his selection to the Household Division. A decorated combat veteran who'd seen Kabul rooftops in Baltic winters, but now rotated back onto ceremonial guard duty, a post as sacred as it was silent. His record read, like the neat crease on his trousers, disciplined, exact, unbroken. The men who knew Fraser truly knew him spoke of his steadiness with a kind of reverence usually reserved for myths. During his second tour, when an IED ripped through their forward operating base, Fraser had maintained his post without so much as a flinch. While others dove for cover, he'd stayed upright, methodically returning fire until reinforcements arrived. He'd earned the nicknames Standing Stone and the Pillar from his unit, though he'd never acknowledged either. His selection for the Queen's Guard hadn't surprised anyone who'd served with him. "Some men are just built differently," his former captain had said at Fraser's transfer ceremony. "Some are made to move forward no matter what. But Callum, he's built to stand still when everything else is falling apart." There had been knowing nods around the room, and Fraser, characteristically, had betrayed no emotions, just a subtle straightening of his already impeccable posture. That same stillness now defined his days at the palace: morning drills, afternoon rotations, evening protocols, the precise angles of arms and shoulders, the measured distance between boots on stone, the perfect symmetry of movement, followed by the perfect absence of it. Some guards found the ceremonial post maddening after combat deployment. Fraser found a different kind of purpose in it, the living embodiment of something permanent in an age that valued little beyond the temporary. The courtyard was closed to the public for the morning. Some quiet diplomatic briefing inside, a few VI moving in and out through restricted access. The usual fanfare of changing the guard wouldn't happen today. But the guards remained old wades. Fraser stood alone in the archway, a solitary silhouette in scarlet, barely shifting even as rain traced down the edge of his bare skin and pooled quietly at his heels. Then came the car, a sleek black Jaguar, curved in from the palace gate and rolled to a gentle stop. No outriders, no fuss, just tinted windows and low clearance. From the passenger side, a familiar figure stepped out, adjusting his collar against the damp. Prince Harry. There was no mistaking him. Tall, ginger-bearded, expensive coat flaring slightly as he stepped onto the courtyard stones. He walked with a kind of stride that tried too hard not to care. Behind him, a single aide with a clipboard and an uncertain expression trailed at a respectful distance. Harry's eyes drifted across the square, expression flattened until they landed on Fraser. For a brief moment his brow twitched. Recognition, resentment. It passed too quickly to read. He didn't nod, didn't smile. He muttered to the aide without slowing. "Still running this charade, are they?" The aide didn't respond, just looked straight ahead, careful not to engage. Fraser didn't move. His gaze remained fixed forward, unshaken by the presence of the prince or the drizzle collecting on his shoulders. The stillness was part of the job, but now it was something more. A quiet answer to a man who had once worn the same uniform, and then walked away from everything it represented. The footsteps grew fainter as Harry passed, but the words casually into the air like cigarette ash had landed, not with impact, with weight. And Fraser, motionless beneath the stone arch, stood tall beneath it. The courtyard echoed faintly under Prince Harry's slow footfalls, his boots tapping across the wet stones in deliberate defiance of the silence. His aide stayed a few steps behind, saying nothing, just gripping the clipboard, like it might shield him from the tension hanging in the misty air. Harry's eyes wandered back to the guard, to Fraser. He slowed his pace, tilted his head slightly, and let his gaze linger on the unmoving figure. "You know what I used to call these guys," he said, voice loud enough to carry. "Parade props." His aide shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting around the empty courtyard, as though checking for a camera crew that might have materialized from the fog, but there was no one, just Fraser, the drizzle, and stone. "Stand there long enough and maybe you start believing it matters," Harry continued. "All the saluting, all the silence makes them feel like soldiers." Still no reaction. Fraser remained fixed as forward, breathing slow. No break in posture. "Imagine wasting your life standing still for a family that couldn't care less," Harry said, scoffing under his breath. "They knight you, sure, but they don't look you in the eye." He turned his back to Fraser briefly, walking a slow, lazy circle near the edge of the arch. "We used to laugh during training. I remember one bloke we timed a guard for 6 hours, straight, not a blink we could spot. Swore he was dead on his feet. Probably was. His aide gave the faintest chuckle, more from obligation than amusement. Harry looked back at Fraser, studied him. The way the rain slicked down the dark fur of his bearskin, the stillness of his grip, the squared shoulders that hadn't dipped, even once under the weight of the rifle. I bet if I told him to bark, he'd do it, Harry muttered, stepping a little closer now. That's what loyalty gets you. Obedience without thought. The words didn't echo, they landed like dull stones. Fraser didn't blink, didn't flinch. But something in the way he held his jaw changed, slight, subtle, but there, and Harry noticed he tilted his head, smirked. You hear me in there? The aide cleared his throat softly. Your Highness, perhaps we should. Your Highness, Harry repeated dryly. Still sounds strange. He turned his attention back to Fraser, now pacing just a few feet in front of him like a man studying a painting he didn't like. The red tunic, the white belt, the polished buttons, all symbols Harry had once worn, and now clearly resented. I wonder, Harry said aloud, how long he'd stand there if I just kept talking all day. Maybe what's the point of pride when no one's listening? The aide spoke again, quieter this time. We should be inside by now. But Harry didn't move, and neither did Fraser. Because for one of them, this silence was awkward, but for the other it was armor. Harry's boots tapped twice more on the stone before coming to a halt, this time, far closer than protocol allowed. He stood just feet from Lance Sergeant Fraser, his arms crossed, a faint curl tugging at the corner of his mouth like he was about to deliver a punchline. You all right in there? He said, asked, leaning slightly forward. Blink twice if you know what year it is. Fraser didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the voice. The rain was beginning to bead along the edge of his bearskin cap, trailing in perfect lines down the scarlet wool of his tunic. He might as well have been carved from the same stone as the palace walls. Harry let out a small laugh. God, it's like talking to a wax figure. He stepped to the side just outside Fraser's peripheral vision, and circled around again. His tone had shifted. Less amused now, less casual. You know, I was one of you once, he muttered. Wore the blues, did the drills, saluted the gates, spent hours getting screamed at for stepping wrong. Still, Fraser didn't move. Guess we all outgrow it eventually, Harry added. He stopped behind the guard now, voice lower. So what keeps you here, huh, fear or just habit? The question lingered longer than any of the others. Even the aide, standing several paces away under the arch, seemed to stiffen at the tone. Harry didn't wait for a reply. He walked back around to face Fraser directly. Then he glanced at the rifle resting neatly across Fraser's chest like a museum piece, the ceremonial SA-80, polished, stripped of magazines, but very real nonetheless. Harry nodded toward it. Bet you've never used that, he said. Probably don't even know how to fire it anymore. But you polish it, you present it, you parade with it like a prop in a pageant. Fraser's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly, a small motion, barely even a twitch, but Harry saw it, and that was enough. You're not a soldier, Harry said, his voice turning sharp. You're a mannequin with benefits. He took a step closer, his shadow now falling across the bright red tunic. Think this means something. This uniform, it's theater, it's dress-up. You're standing in the rain to protect a flag no one salutes anymore, for a crown that doesn't even call you by name. Still no answer, but the air had changed. Fraser hadn't blinked, hadn't moved, but now, even his stillness felt different, like something had been drawn. Harry tilted his head, studying him one last time. Why do you do it? He asked, quieter now. What could possibly be worth all this silence? There was no answer, at least not yet. But the question would not hang unanswered for long, because the silence, the guard's silence, was about to speak louder than anything Prince Harry had to say. Prince Harry stood there, chest lightly rising and falling, waiting for another twitch, another movement. Anything. He wasn't sure anymore whether he wanted to provoke, prove something, or just be heard. Maybe all three. He leaned in again, one pace too close. Tell me something, Sergeant, he said, his voice low, cutting through the drizzle. Do you really believe in all this anymore? The moment lingered. Then a voice measured, deep, carved from the kind of discipline that doesn't flinch in sandstorms or silence, without turning his head, without shifting a single inch. Fraser answered. Belief isn't needed, sir. Only respect. Harry froze. The aide blinked. Even the air seemed to pause. The words hadn't been loud. They hadn't even broken formation, but they landed like a hammer on sheet glass. Harry stepped back, not out of fear, but instinct. He hadn't expected an answer. Not here, not now, and certainly not like that. Respect, he repeated, brow furrowing. Respect for what, exactly? Fraser's posture didn't change, but his voice followed up, crisp and quiet. For those who hold the line, even when others walk away. There it was, no venom, no direct insult. But the cut was clean and surgical. Harry's mouth opened slightly, then closed. The drizzle tapped gently on his coat as he glanced back toward his aide, who quickly looked away. Something flickered across Harry's face then. A shadow of memory, perhaps for just a moment. The hardened facade cracked to reveal a glimpse of the young soldier he'd once been. The one who'd understood what it meant to stand shoulder to shoulder with men like Fraser. The royal who'd once worn desert fatigues with genuine pride, who'd flown Apache helicopters over hostile territory, who'd felt the weight of a nation's expectations on his shoulders and hadn't yet decided it was too heavy to bear. The rain seemed to fall harder now, as if the skies themselves were punctuating the tension that hung between them. A distant roll of thunder barely audible. More vibration than sound dribbled through the stone courtyard. Neither man acknowledged it. The weather was just another test of endurance, another element to be weathered without complaint. He turned back. "You're saying I walked away?" Fraser did not reply, did not need to. The weight of the words still hung there between them, like fog that wouldn't lift. Harry scoffed, shaking his head. "You lot always think you're better because you stayed, because you never questioned it." Fraser remained silent. "I did more in one tours of Afghanistan than most of you have done your whole careers," Harry added, louder now, bitterness leaking through. "And you call that walking away?" Still nothing, but that silence, intentional now, surgical, was its own kind of reply. Harry's tone turned defensive. "You think I don't understand sacrifice?" At last, Fraser replied again, his voice just above the sound of falling rain. "Sacrifice doesn't end when you step off the battlefield, sir. Sometimes it begins after." It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't loud, but it hit like a mortar. Harry exhaled slowly, his expression darkening. "You're very clever, Sergeant," he said, not quite a compliment, very poetic. Fraser didn't move, didn't even acknowledge the remark. Harry glanced down at the wet stone under his shoes. "I think you're teaching me something." Fraser said nothing, but his discipline, his silence, was louder than any retort. For the first time since the exchange began, Harry didn't seem sure of what to say next, and that shift, subtle though it was, could be felt all the way to the aide under the arch, who now stared at Fraser like he was seeing him for the first time. Because for all the years Harry had spent in uniform, he had forgotten what it looked like when a soldier stood his ground. Not with weapons, not with anger, but with quiet, unshakable conviction. The silence settled again, thicker now, like a blanket of fog that wouldn't lift. Harry's jaw worked, slightly the way it always did when he was on the edge of either laughter or fury. But what came next wasn't an outburst. It was colder than that. "Right," he said, nodding slowly, voice dipping into something that almost resembled amusement. "So now you're philosophers too. They should issue you all a leather-bound diary with that rifle." Still no reaction. Fraser's eyes didn't flinch, didn't track, didn't even blink. Harry took a slow, deliberate step forward, not enough to breach protocol, but close enough that the edge of his voice felt personal. "You talk about sacrifice like it's noble," he muttered, "but I've seen what loyalty really costs. I've seen what this family does to the ones who give everything and still get treated like pawns on a chessboard." The aide shifted uncomfortably behind him. "Do you think they care about you?" Harry asked, voice sharpening. "Really? The senior royals, the ones you hold the line for? Think they even know your name?" Still nothing. Harry smiled bitterly. "Stand out here and rot for them, wouldn't you? Just because it's tradition. Just because someone told you it's noble." Then more quietly, as if to himself, "I was once proud of this uniform too. Then I realized, it doesn't matter how many medals you've earned. If you don't play their game, they erase you." He looked up, and here you are, still playing. Fraser remained unmoved. That was when the edge crept into Harry's voice. "You think you're the real soldier here," he said, almost laughing. "You, standing still for tourists. I served, I buried mates, I dragged bodies across sand. You think I walked away because I lacked discipline?" Fraser replied softly, "No, sir." Harry blinked. Fraser continued, "You walked away because you lost faith." Harry's shoulders stiffened, but Fraser said, eyes still locked forward, "Discipline doesn't need faith, it just needs purpose." The words were velvet-covered blades. "You think I lost purpose?" Harry snapped. "I think," Fraser replied evenly, "you've mistaken disillusionment for clarity." The aide gave a visible flinch at that one, stared at the guard, expression unreadable. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Something in Fraser's tone had landed deeper than expected. "This job," Fraser continued, "isn't about believing in fairy tales. It's about being a barrier between chaos and order, between threat and peace. You knew that once." Harry took a step back, as if physically recoiling from the weight of it. "You think standing here makes you noble?" he asked. "You think silence is strength?" Fraser didn't answer that. He didn't need to, because the weight of that silence, undaunted, unbroken, unshaken, was starting to feel like a wall Harry couldn't get through, a wall he hadn't realized still existed inside these walls, and it was built of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Conviction without bitterness, without vanity, without need for approval, just quiet, unshakable duty. Harry looked down, rain sliding off the bridge of his nose. Then softly, as if confessing to no one, "They never told me it would feel like betrayal, just to stop believing." Fraser didn't move, but that line about purpose hung in the air between them, ringing louder than any drumline ever could. The courtyard had gone still. Even the wind seemed to pause between the stone walls. Harry stared hard at the motionless man before him, his expression flickering, uncertain, now, less like a prince, and more like a man who'd started asking, a conversation he wasn't prepared to finish. "You ever question it?" Harry asked suddenly, voice quieter, less sharp. "All this, you really never wonder if they deserve it?" Fraser said nothing. Not out of evasion, but because that question didn't warrant an answer. Not from a soldier on post, and not in the presence of everything the uniform still represented. Harry exhaled. "You won't even say no, will you? Just stand there, like a relic. That's what they want. That's what they count on." Silency stepped in again, to close, now close enough, that his breath fogged faintly against the polished brass of Fraser's chestplate. "I used to think silence meant strength," he said, "but sometimes it's just fear dressed up in obedience." The aide shifted. Again, watching anxiously, rain tapped on the pavement like a ticking clock, quiet, insistent. Then Fraser spoke. His voice was still low, still composed, but this time it carried finality. "Your Highness," he said, measured, exact. "If silence unnerves you, it's only because it echoes what you tried to leave behind." Harry froze. The word struck like a clean blow, not loud, not cruel, but precision cut, undeniable, and perfectly aimed. For a second, all the practiced defenses slipped from Harry's face. Fraser continued, his tone still formal, still controlled, but with something undeniable behind it. "We don't stand here for applause, sir, or out of blind obedience. We stand because someone must." Harry's lips parted slightly. Fraser went on. "The uniform is not about heritage. It's about holding still when others walk away." That was the sentence, the one Harry would never forget. Not because it was shouted, not because it was clever, but because it told the truth so plainly, so quietly that no rebuttal could touch it. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about humiliation. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was just duty stated clearly, without apology. Harry straightened. For a moment, he looked older, less the rebellious royal and more the weary soldier he once was. Something had cracked in his posture, not broken, just shifted. He stepped back. "I didn't come here to argue," he said at last. "Fraser didn't answer," Harry added, almost to himself. "I suppose I just wanted to see if anything had changed." Fraser replied softly, "Some things aren't meant to." For the first time, Harry looked not at the uniform but at the man inside it. Asterisk. For a fleeting second, he saw it's the discipline, the sacrifice, the sheer weight of silent responsibility that came with guarding something others discarded. Then, wordlessly, he turned. He didn't look back, but the aide did, once casting a glance at Fraser before trailing after the prince into the grey morning. The sound of retreating footsteps faded, and Fraser, he hadn't shifted an inch. But somehow, he had said everything that needed saying. The Jaguar's engine started with that luxury per quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. It pulled out of the courtyard without fanfare, slipping past the black iron gates like it had never been there. Only then did Fraser move. It wasn't much, just the faintest roll of his shoulders beneath the scarlet tunic, resetting his posture as the morning drizzle thickened. The moment was over. The courtyard was quiet again, and the duty remained. But not everyone had left. The aide, Harry's aide, lingered back for a beat too long. Mid-30s, well-groomed, a type used to blending in behind someone else's title. But now he stood alone, watching Fraser with something new behind his eyes. He stepped forward only to the rope line. "Respectful of the distance, Sergeant," he said carefully, voice low. Fraser didn't look at him, but the subtle dip of his chin showed he was listening. "I know it's not my place," the aide continued, "but that back there, I think he needed to hear it." No reply. "Not because he'll change. He won't. But maybe he'll remember what it felt like to face someone who didn't flinch." Still nothing from Fraser, but he didn't need to reply. That stillness, its own kind of response, held steady in the air between them. The aide hesitated. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about the way he spoke to you." Fraser's voice came low, steady, unmistakably kind beneath its professional edge. "He spoke to the uniform, not to me." The aide blinked, and just like that he understood. Fraser hadn't taken it personally, because there was no person standing there, not in the way Harry wanted. There was only the post, the uniform, the service. That was what had unsettled the prince, not anger, not ego, conviction. The aide gave a small nod, almost a bow, though he caught himself, then turned and made his way back across the courtyard. Fraser resumed his posture, rifle upright, eyes ahead, rain streaking clean lines down the polished black of his bearskin. The palace had a way of making time feel different, slower, more deliberate. Asterisk. Deliberate, as if the very seconds were measured by a different clock. Fraser had learned to inhabit that time, to find comfort in its steady rhythm. In a world of constant motion, of screens and notifications and endless distraction, there was something almost rebellious about this kind of stillness, this act of standing motionless as the world spun madly around you. That stillness was what the tourists came to see, though they rarely understood it. They saw the uniform, the precision, the spectacle. They didn't see the discipline beneath the hours of training, the burn in motionless limbs, the mental endurance it took to shut out discomfort and distraction, to stand regardless. From Fraser's fixed position, he could see the palace in fragments, the corner of a window, the edge of a stone facade, the distant flutter of the royal standard against grey clouds. He didn't need to move his eyes to take it in. After hundreds of hours at this post, The palace lived in his peripheral vision like a permanent shadow. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. A few tourists were let in through the main gates, quiet ones. Here for the architecture, not the confrontation. They didn't know what had happened earlier. They didn't need to, but one man did. An older gentleman standing by the inner barrier with a cane and a pale grey trilby tucked under one arm. He wore a dark wool coat and a row of medals on his breast that hadn't seen sunlight in a long time. He didn't speak, didn't wave, just raised a single-gloved hand to his temple and offered a slow, textbook salute. Fraser didn't respond. He couldn't, but something about the way he stood in that moment, just a breath deeper, just a hair more anchored, made it clear he'd seen it, felt it, and accepted it behind the veteran. A boy maybe 9 or 10 watched wide-eyed. He a real soldier. The boy whispered to his mum. She nodded gently. The realist kind. The boy stepped forward, standing next to the veteran now. He didn't salute, didn't know how, but he straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin, and stood tall for a few seconds. He mimicked Fraser's exact posture. The veteran smiled quietly. Didn't correct him, didn't need to. Sometimes you teach by standing still. Sometimes that's enough. Across London, the news cycle churned on. Headlines flashed across screens. Politics, scandals, celebrity gossip, the usual noise. But here, in this quiet corner of the palace courtyard, something timeless was unfolding. The kind of moment that doesn't make headlines but makes differences. Each hour the rain would ease, then return. The sky would brighten, then darken again. Tourists would come and go in waves, their phones raised in unison like some modern salute to the spectacle before them. And through it all, Lance Sergeant Callum Fraser stood his post. Every so often, someone in the crowd would ask questions, whispered curiosities about how long the guards stand, whether they ever speak, what happens if there's an emergency. The more respectful visitors would listen to the tour guide's answers with genuine interest. The less respectful would try to provoke a reaction, testing the limits of discipline with silly faces or crude gestures. Fraser saw it all, heard it all, and remained unmoved, because that was the point. Not the uniform, not the ritual, not even the tradition, but the unshakable certainty that some things will hold firm regardless of circumstance. That against the shifting tides of politics and opinion, of royal favor and public sentiment, there are still men and women who, if simply do their duty, without needing praise, without craving attention, just standing firm. Have you ever underestimated someone just because they stood silent? And what would you have said if you were in that courtyard watching it unfold? Do you think Prince Harry deserved that one-line reminder? Or did he earn something stronger? Drop your answers in the comments. We read every single one. If this story made you pause, made you think, or reminded you of what real respect looks like, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss tomorrow's upload. And if you know someone who still thinks royal guards just march and pose, share this video with them. Let them see what quiet loyalty truly sounds like. Our other royal guard stories should be popping up on your screen right now. Watch those next, and we'll see you tomorrow same time with another story that proves silence often speaks loudest.